And I want to commend you for having such an interesting topic, because we know what is now permeating the country. But sometimes I wonder if we know some of the reasons and what's behind some of this stuff, and if we're too quick to say that one thing caused a cup of water caused a flood, that kind of thing, rather than look behind the waterfall to find out who was back there manipulating it.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Mm-hmm. My struggle, always through my husband, who absolutely was one of my master teachers in this thing, what got me very involved with fighting for the oppressed. Those people who were shut out from the mainstream of society after being told that it was an open country and that it was enough and nothing could be shared for everyone. But we found out since the middle passage of the Holocaust of our enslavement coming over, black people have not been free from that yet. Now, I realize that a few legislative pieces have been raised, or we'll have a few statues out there, but most of those things have not been passed on behalf of black people as we can see it. As we look around now, we have a United States Senate, and with all the black women in this country, we do not have one black female on the United States Senate. And you do know, any sister will tell you that if you can run a black house, you can certainly run a White House, and I think Michelle Obama will show us that that can be done. We also have found out that when we talk about school shootings and all of these various things, and we talk about drugs in comparison with these, when we look at shootings, when we look at killings, when we look at the fightings, when we look at the disrespect for the parents and authority, when we look at all of this, all of these things happened long before drugs were brought here and introduced into the black community. And the reason why I say that what absolutely brought this on long before that, the family is the first and most important institution that any person will become acquainted with. That is the absolute first. Somehow the government, the powers that be, and those who did not live in depressed communities obviously agreed with them and decided that we will take discipline out of the hands of black parents. Now, when you live in communities where you have to make certain rules and regulations and said, I said don't cross the street, I said don't do that, you have to have something to back it up. But instead, these people wanted to interpret discipline as beating, fighting, maiming, murdering, and that. It was not that. It was telling them that I brought you here and I'll take you out, but not literally to take you out, but I have to be in charge because we live in a racist society, and you can get arrested, black boys, for walking while black, thinking while black, driving while black, and anything you're doing while black. We knew that all of these things were going on. When they took the discipline out, they threatened the parents. And they said, if you are caught disciplining your children, you are going to jail. Well, that frightened a lot of mothers, especially the single mothers, since about two-thirds of black children are raised by single parents. It frightened a lot of them. So what happened? The children decided to control themselves, raise themselves, and bring themselves up. Now, this is long before they shipped the drugs in here and for some reason happened to have placed them over into the black community because that's where they were. And as long as these drugs came into the black community, as long as problems were going on in the black community, shootings and killings or anything like that, that was all right. That was not on Bill O'Reilly. That was not on Larry King. That was not on any of the shows. But the minute it hit the white suburban communities, then they decided to look upon this thing to see what was terrible. Now, as for the street drugs, and then it went on from discipline to the public schools. As you well know, our public schools have literally become killing fields because they took the discipline out of that, too. And by taking the discipline out, what do you have? The teachers are afraid of the principal. The principals are scared of the school board. The school board is scared of the superintendent. The superintendent is afraid of the parents. And the parents are afraid of the kids. And the kids ain't scared of nobody. And so as a result of that, and that is not altogether about drugs, that is because the discipline was taken out. Now, when I taught in the public schools in Washington, D.C. some years ago, Dr. Bregan may wish to comment on this, but the psychiatric community was all into this thing back then because we had children that they would give in as low as the second grade, they were giving them Valium because they said that they couldn't sit still. They gave them Ritalin. They said that they couldn't sit still and that we could not socialize the children in these things. They were given these things, and those who were given that, believe it or not, would sleep at the desk. Those who are out there doing other things, the hyperactive ones, are the active children, as boys and girls will be at that age. There were no drugs involved in that. It's just that the discipline was taken away from the powers that be. The teachers were afraid to discipline them. They would be fired, and the mothers would have the children taken away from them. That went all the way through. And since the powers that be ignored all of those things until they got to the white communities, then they perked up the ears. the legislation passed, then we walked into things to punish the very people that we should have been helping. They came up with something stupid called 3 strikes, you're out. Well, my God, look how many strikes George Bush has had. Look how many strikes Condoleezza White on Rice has had. And they're all still in. Then they said, after that passing that legislation, all of the things that they would do if you deign to discipline your children, well, then the children decided that they'll have to create their own families. And so their families became their peers who were also on the streets and also out there because mama couldn't discipline and if father was there, he could not discipline them. So I'm not sure that we can blame all of this upon drugs. I think we need to look upon a society that refused to have fair equity in all of the communities. They refuse to employ people in an equitable way. Black men, most of them, if they are employed, most of them are underemployed. It is the same thing as black women who are running the ghettos and the hoods by themselves because of some of the desertions that have taken place there. We have found that we are not able to get the major jobs that we need, and even here, after having 42 white presidents of the United States, you still had half of them fighting because here is a presumptive president, is a black man, the one who is to come in for that. So you see that we can't leave racism, to me, is more poisonous than the drugs because the racism has led a lot of people to take up on not only the psychiatric drugs, but the street drugs. So why isn't the government stopping the drugs from coming in here? They stopped everything else. They stopped the meth fly from coming into the state of California. They have stopped everyone that they believe is going through the airport because they believe the terrorist scare. They said that they stopped the weapons of mass destruction, but the biggest weapon of mass destruction done on the black community first were the drugs that they sent in here. All the police officers who do not live in our area, but they live in suburban communities, then they want to come in. And when they stop for one for drugs, eventually it has been reported that some of those police officers end up with swimming pools that they never would have had because they have not reported the monies from that. So drugs is a byproduct. It is discipline. It is racism. It is an unequal society. It is a group of people who still want to carry on the racism from back from the days of slavery. That's the major cause, because we refuse to sit down and discuss it. When Bill Clinton was in, he promised 1,000,000 times that we're going to have a discussion on racism. If you do that, then you don't have to discuss what is food doing, what is clothes doing, what are drugs doing, what is that. What it's doing is that people are not being treated fairly, and they're sick and tired of being sick and tired. That even to this day in the schools, now the psychiatric community may not be present there, but some think that they are because of the labels that the children are given. The poorer the schools are, and the teachers say that they can't control, many of them really believe that children are uneducable, and when you feel that way, you don't do your best to control, but they've given them labels. It's nothing for the teachers to say, I have a class full of bipolar children, or they'll get those that they have diagnosed as bipolar, and they don't have the credentials, of course, to do that. They will say that they are having attention deficit disorder. You could say that about our government if you chose to. Then they will say that they are slow learners. They put them in something called special ed classes, which are nothing but holding cells until they're old enough to go to the state prison. And once they get to the state prison, into the real holding cells, and then when they come out of there, if they have been convicted of any form of felony, then they cannot get jobs. Then they have to take to the streets, cannot get jobs at all. But if they do get a job, then they have to pay taxes, which we know is taxation without representation. So I'm saying that the drugs may work in with this, but not in the way we think. Isn't it just amazing that you have a lot of senior citizens, a lot of people who are living in poverty who cannot afford drugs, and yet they have to try to get them from Canada or order them from the Internet or wherever they can go, and yet we're hearing that they're everywhere, that the psychiatric drugs are out there. Well, why aren't they out there for the people that actually need them rather than giving them to children because we have teachers who cannot teach them? Well, if they continue to go the way they are now, I don't know what we can expect school shootings to look like because I'm not sure that we can expect any more schools out there, period. Because the way they are functioning now, you can see that they are something, someone needs to babysit the children. The only reason why the public schools, which I call them government schools, but it's okay if you want to call them public schools since that's who controls them. At the rate this is going right now, you have more and more teachers who are dropping out of it, the lack of pay, the lack of respect. Things are just not going right for them in that particular position. Now when parents get a nickel above the rent, they're taking them out of public schools. They're putting them in private schools where they're not as crowded and it can be one-on-one, the type things they're doing. People have asked the public schools for years, you can take some of this fighting away if you take them out of all of these designers' clothes, Prada and Chanel and all of that crowd, and put them all in uniforms. They're in uniforms in the military. So you will take out that kind of status thing that I'm better dressed than you and I have all of that. Well, you'd be surprised that the public school people and public school boards are saying, we are not going to put these children in uniforms. We believe they should have the freedom to wear what they want to wear. Well, God, you should have the freedom to wear what you want to wear anywhere, but there are still certain precautions that would help you to cut down that if I'm wearing red, I may be shot from across the street from a red gang and all of that. The public schools, we wrote a book called The Miseducation of the Black Child. Those schools need to be overhauled so that you can completely train and educate every man, woman, and child, regardless of where they live. The school boards, it is time for them to leave unless they live in those communities that they serve, or you're not going to make it go. They have headhunters to go out and find superintendents that live way, way across somewhere, not even in the same state or the city. You need the school superintendent ought to be living in the same district, just like the police ought to be living in the districts of the people that they police. And so it is until you do that and open up that gap there, you are not going to have anything that is even recognizable of a public school back in those days, but you're going to have more prisons. While we're spending all of this money building up the prison industrial complex to house more there, that money could be going to educate people. But you see where the mindset of the government is, and you know who's in those prisons. Right now, we have 1 million black men in jail waiting for justice and 1 million black women in church waiting for Jesus because their men have been locked up and there's nothing they can do about it. Absolutely to be commended for taking a stand like this against such a huge, powerful organization. Now, we need to help him to become the next president of the American Medical Association and get in there and help that group.
Okay. I got another caller, 918. What's your comment and what's your name and where you're calling from?
Yes, hi, this is John calling from Broken Arrow, Oklahoma. We tend to travel. I'm a national educational consultant, and I've got a question for Dr. Hare. Do you see a correlation between the lack of male teachers in our public school system and the awful discipline problem that we're having? One of the things that we've noticed is that there are probably less than 20% of the teachers are male teachers in this country, and most of them are in administration. So our children don't get a chance to see a black male figure early on, so which is critical, I think. And I just wanted a comment from Dr. Hale on that.
Well, first of all, I cannot commend you enough. That is absolutely an excellent question. And incidentally, I was born in Tulsa, Oklahoma, right there next to you in Broken Arrow, the whole thing. But let me say this, is that for years what we have done, when we wrote The Endangered Black Family, and one of our books, we stated in that book that it is very critical that we recruit black males to bring them into the schools. And the reason why you have to recruit them and come down into the elementary school, even with the kindergarten and the first grade, most black boys, it takes a man to show a boy how to become a man. It's like it takes a woman how to show a girl how to become a woman. And it's hard to become something that you seldom see or that you haven't seen. Most black boys grow up, there is only the mother in the house or the grandmother is there. In the church, there's mostly women in there, as you well know. The only person in there, the man mostly is the pastor and maybe a deacon or so. But until those boys are exposed to seeing what black men are like, they go to the school. The principal is usually female. Most of the teachers are are females, especially down in the elementary schools. Well, if this is all that they have seen, then they don't get a chance to understand what it is like to emulate a man, what is it like to be like a man. One principal told me once that, sometimes we have men that have not graduated from college. I said, first of all, we're going to have to change that structure so, to help them to get out of college, whatever it is. But in the meantime, while we're doing that, we've got to understand that growing up years ago, many people knew this in most of the black families, that if you went to the 6th grade, you were able to teach the one in the 5th grade how to read. The 5th grader was able to teach the 3rd grader, and the 3rd grader was able to teach the 2nd grader. It went down the line. You don't have to have a Ph.D. to teach someone fun with Dick and Jane. And so we said that you bring them in there as groups from the coalition of this or from a church or whatever it is to help them learn how to read, help them to maneuver the terrain, put them on the playground, help them, let them stand out there to help to keep order. And every once in a while, you invite the successful black men who may be on these corporations to come in there and talk to the black boys of what it is like to become a black man, what it is like to become a marriageable black man, what it is like to study and to go to college. This is why we have to share the few black men that we have here, because other than that, you ask the black boys, who's successful? What do you want to be in your community? They're going to name the drug dealer, the hip-hopper, the ecclesiastical pimp, sometimes called a preacher. They're going to name people like that rather than to actually see what success truly means And I think that is a good question. Until we get black men down there helping to teach black children, black boys specifically, we're going to be in a little peril here.
Well, that's the whole purpose and point of our organization, 7,000 Men. We just want to put that out there. We're definitely reaching back into the communities and with the young men to give them structure and to have a black male role model to emulate after. So you have absolutely right when you make that point. Who will they look after in terms of modeling going?
You know, it's I'm so in favor of what you're doing. I don't have words to express how much I think you're right on target. And it's a problem, while I think it's more severe in the black community, it's really throughout the country that fathers are absent or not enough involved. I coined the phrase DAD, Dad Attention Deficit Disorder. And it's just so common. So many of the families I see, the dad is so busy that he's not there to enforce his discline and his moral presence.
Wait, Dr. Reagan, what is he busy doing? Because what could make you any busier than rearing those children that you have to bring into this world?
Absolutely.
So busy doing what?
Absolutely. They're busy in the communities I work with, who come in and can afford to come see me. They're busy working. They're earning a living. They're doing all these things. Maybe they're playing golf or whatever else. But the notion of children raising themselves has permeated the society with disastrous results. And what you are doing is, I'm in total agreement, is the single most important thing that can be done, which is to get men involved in the lives of young children and especially young boys.
And first starting off getting them involved in the lives of their own children. There is no reason. I was at a conference in Baltimore as their keynote speaker, and some black women were so frustrated there, they stood and said, do we have to now become the new black men of the community? I said, it's hard for you to become that even if you want to become that, and that isn't something that you should have to be.
Good
because
for
they
you.
said that it used to be there was a time that black men protected our communities. In fact, there was a time when you could drive through the black community, and there were a lot of pretty women at home, and there were a lot of working men, black men at work. Now you drive through the communities, and there are a lot of pretty women at work, and if there are any black men there, they're sitting at home, head rags on and all. Well, see, that's not the example and the role model that we need out there for black children to see. And if you can't find a job, as I've told many black men, create your own. That's what Carter G. Woodson, who wrote The Miseducation of the Negro. Everybody's got something they can sell. Everybody got something they can move. Everybody has something they can do.
So you have the point. That's the point.
Right. That's absolutely right.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I just cannot wait for the hookup.
Me too.
You're going to get it.
Do that. And Jeff, I'm going to hold you responsible.
Oh, well, I'm going to be responsible.
I'm going to hold you responsible for this.
I told you that's my position, Director of Outreach, and I network everybody, so I am that mediator, so absolutely.
Well, that's what we need.
Absolutely.
We need someone who's connecting and doing all of these things. Well, I am certainly happy that you invited me to the show this morning. I just enjoyed the whole entire discussion. I'm glad we did education and medication.
That's right. That's right.
Amen.
As a black community is a gamut of issues that we need to address, so why not go to another direction and with the.
This is right. This is right. Because with the education, maybe that would help solve the need for the medication.
That's what I have found. Dr. Hare, I found that when I taught a child to read, that child could go from the class's monster to the teacher's pet. Just by learning to read.
Would. Just by learning to read. Right. Because it was something that built self-esteem.
Yes, it does. It builds the self-esteem. In fact, there was a kid that his name was Roland, and he was having a lot of difficulty at his school. And at that time, I was assistant principal, so I got all the discipline problems. So I started bringing him into my office and teaching him how to read in the office. He learned to read that year. At the end of the year, he was the best reader, and not only that, but he was his teacher's pet.
See, this can happen. It can happen. And these people who will say that they're uneducable, I said, what do you mean? And where did you get that from?
Amen.
I said, what do you mean? Everyone was born with potential.
Yes.
But you know how we can, well, I'm looking forward to hear from you all on my machine. Now, I'm going to get that information, then I'll call you, and Jeff sends all the information in.
And I'll be doing
that. And if he does not send that, we're going to come after him. We're going to come after him with a switch like they used to.
Okay. I want to thank both my distinguished guests today for sharing your very poignant points in regards to issues affecting our black community.